Dear students, my name is baxronova. I'm a teacher of Bucharest State University. Now we have English lesson with you. Our today's theme is risk management. Let's begin our lesson with a new theme. It is the risk management process. I know, okay, I think you have an idea now. It's risk. Yes? Okay, it's risk management process. It is the risk management process consists of a series of steps that, when undertaken in sequence, enable continual improvement in decision making. Yes? Next, steps of risk management process. There are some steps. As you see, first step is communicate and consult. Next, establish the context. Third one, identify the risks. Next, analyze the risks. Evaluate the risks. Trace the risks. Monitor and review. Of course, there are some steps should be. First step, communicate and consult. What is it? Communicate and consult. It is communication and consultation aims to identify who should be involved in assessment of risk, including identification, analysis, and evaluation, and it should engage those who will be involved in treatment, monitoring, and review of risk. Such communication and consultation will be reflected in each step of the process described here. As an initial step, there are two main aspects that should be identified in order to establish the requirements for the remainder of the process. There are communication and consultation aimed at eliciting risk information, managing stakeholder perception, management of risk. Okay, next. A. Eliciting risk information. It is communication and consultation may occur within the organization or between the organization and its stakeholders. It's very rare that only one person will hold all the information needed to identify the risks to a business or even to an activity or project. It's therefore important to identify the range of stakeholders who will assist in making this information complete. Okay, tips for effective communication and consultation. What kind of tips do you know? In our presentation, there are some tips given for you. Be attentive. The first tip is determine at the outset whether a communication strategy and or plan is required. Determine the best method or media for communication and consultation. And the last one is the significance or complexity of the issue or activity in question can be used as a guide as to how much communication and consultation is required. The more complex and significant to the organization, the more detailed and comprehensive the requirement. Second step, it is establish the context. Provides a 5-step process to assess with establishing the context within which risk will be identified. The first is establish the internal context. Second is establish the internal context and the third is external context, and the third is the risk management context. The fourth is develop risk criteria, and the last one is define the structure for risk analysis. This is how to establish the context. Establishing the internal context. How can we establish the internal context? As previously discussed, risk is the change of something happened that will impact on objectives, such as the objectives and goals of business, project, or activity must first be identified to ensure that all significant risks are understood. This ensures that risk decisions always support the broader goals and objectives of the business. This approach encourages long-term and strategic thinking. In establishing the internal context, the business owner may also ask themselves the following questions. Is there an internal culture that needs to be considered? For example, are staff resistant to change? Is there a professional culture that might create unnecessary risks for the business? What staff groups are present? What capabilities does the business have in terms of people, systems, processes, equipment, and other resources? Establish the external context. This step defines the overall environment in which a business operates and includes an understanding of the clients and customers, perceptions of the business. An analysis of those factors will identify the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats to the business in the external environment. A business owner may ask the following questions when determining the external context. Okay. Tips for establishing internal and external contexts. Determine the significance of the activity in achieving the organization's goal and objectives. Define the operating environment. Identify internal and external stakeholders and determine their involvement in the risk management process. Develop the risk. Develop risk criteria. Risk criteria allow a business to clearly define unacceptable levels of risk. Conversely, risk criteria may include establish an acceptable level of risk for a specific activity or event. In this step of risk criteria may be broadly defined and then further refined later in the risk management process. Okay, process. Define the structure for risk analysis. The last one is isolate the categories of risk that you want to manage. This will provide greater depth and accuracy on identifying significant risks. Next one is the chosen structure for risk analysis will depend on the types of activity or issues, its complexity, and the context of the risk. Okay, there are two main ways to identify risk, yes? First is identifying retrospective risks. These risks are those that have previously occurred, such as incidents or accidents. Retrospective risk identification is often the most common way to identify a risk and the easiest. It is easier to believe something if it has happened before. It is also easier to quantify its impact and to see that it has caused. There are many sources of information about retrospective risk. These include hazard or incident logs, registers, audit reports, customer complaints, accreditation documents and reports, past staff or client surveys, newspapers or professional media, such as journals or websites. Second, identifying prospective risks. Prospective risks are often harder to identify. There are things that have not yet happened, but might happen sometime in the future. Identification should include all risks, whether or not they are currently being managed. The rationale here is to record all significant risks and monitor or review the effectiveness of their control. For identifying prospective risks include brainstorming with staff or external stakeholders, researching the economic, political, legislative, and operating environment, conducting interviews with relevant people and/or organizations, undertaking surveys of staff or clients to identify anticipated issues or problems, flow charting a process, reviewing system design or preparing system analysis techniques. Okay. Tips for effective risk identification. Select a risk identification methodology appropriate to the type of risk and the nature of the activity. Involve the right people in risk identification activities. Take a life cycle approach to risk identification and determine how risks change and evolve throughout this cycle. Okay. And 6 is treats risk. Risk treatment is about considering opinions for treating risks that were not considered acceptable or tolerable at step 5. Risk statement involves identifying opinions for treating or controlling risk in order to either reduce or eliminate negative consequences or to reduce the likelihood of an adverse occurrence. Risk treatment should also aim to enhance positive outcomes. Options for risk management and treatment. Identifying the following options that may assist in the minimization of negative risk or an increase in the impact of positive risk. Avoid the risk. Change the likelihood of the occurrence. Change the consequences, share the risk, retain the risk. Okay, the seventh step number 7 is monitor and review. Monitor and review is an essential and integral step in the risk management process. A business owner must monitor risks and review the effectiveness of the treatment plan, strategies, and management systems that have been set up to effectively manage risk. Risks need to be monitored periodically to ensure changing circumstances don't alter the risk priorities. Very few risks will remain static, therefore the risks management process needs to be regularly repeated so that new risks are captured in the process and effectively managed. A risk management plan at a business level should be reviewed at least on an annual basis. An effective way to ensure that this occurs is to combine risk planning or risk review with annual planning. Okay, summary of the risk management step. As we said before, it is establish the content, identify the risks, analyze the risks, evaluate the risks, and treat the risks. Yes? Okay. Thank you for your attention, students. And I think you understand about risk management process. You get more information about the tips and of risk management. I think you should also think before doing some risks. Yes, making some serious decisions. You should think carefully what to do, how to do. You may ask from your relatives, parents, if you have some serious problems. Don't have any problem and be happy. Okay, thank you for your attention, and now revise all the materials at home and write an essay about making serious decisions. Thank you. Goodbye, students.